welcome in heroes, adventurers, and ne'er-do-wells to a Cloaks and Capes podcast, which we're going to say is about D&D, but if you're like, oh, a D&D podcast, I don't like that game, I'm leaving, don't. It's mostly for SEO purposes and because it's the only game that I know how to play. But everything that we talk about here...
You know Star Wars now.
You know Vampire now.
You know Vampire?
No, I don't know if I do. I play those games,
you
but
play them. You don't know them.
I wouldn't say that I know them.
Neither do I.
Yeah. That's a real secret, Cap. But I think, the things that we talk about here, the things that you learn will be things that you can apply to all sorts of different tabletop RPGs. So welcome in. My name is Robbie Landis. Here with me is my co-host, Kali Scales, and our first inaugural guest, ErinMyLaundry. Erin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm actually quite shocked that you asked me to be your first guest, considering our online bit of our love-hate relationship.
Well, first of all, it's an online bit, and there's still love in there, so...
Also, that's the only way Robbie knows how to love.
Exactly.
There is no just like warm, kind affection. It's always couched in aggression in some way.
That is untrue.
It's not.
Okay, no, you're right. There's also some slipping in of mashed potatoes it's just like ice cream.
Don't you bring that weird ass slander into this podcast, okay? And no, the love is there. I just do that in private.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
okay.
Right. I'll just say I've had a couple characters date your characters now, and it's always been a little
all right,
bit...
that's a topic for a whole different episode right there.
There we go.
Right?
Future episode, romance in your tabletop
We
game.
will absolutely get there, 100%. But for our first episode, for the inaugural pilot episode of the Cloaks and Capes podcast, we thought that we would talk about something that everyone can or will eventually be able to identify with. I think that people who have yet to play or who have played for years will all be able to sort of, take something away from this episode, whether it's information, advice, or just sort of waxing nostalgia. And that's talking about our first time, whether it was in a dingy lit basement, whether it was done in secret in your treehouse. Maybe your parents helped you, but the first time that you ever played a tabletop RPG, it's getting more and more popular. What are you laughing for?
Thank you for clarifying.
Was there something that I said?
Maybe your parents helped you in your first time.
That's what I mean.
Look,
you put that in there specifically for my gutter mind.
No, hold on. Famously, or maybe not, maybe you don't know this, I don't know, who knows, but famously Matt Mercer's mom started him in Dungeons and Dragons.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Parents are absolutely a gateway into the world of role-playing.
I learned it from you, Mom.
Where do you think we get our traumas from?
Mood.
It's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole other podcast. But more than ever, people are getting into tabletop RPGs, into D&D, and it's the main question that I get asked when people stop into our Twitch chat is, hey, if I want to play, how do I go about doing it? Because I think it's a lot easier than it was. You don't need to have people in the same room as you to do it now. There's so many tools that are out there online. But at the same time, there also isn't a great place to go to for it. People are always like, oh, well, where should I go, to learn, the idea of learning. There's so many places and things and ways that you can go about doing this. So Kali, where do you want to start?
Gosh, I think if we're going to talk about when we got into playing tabletop games, you did need a group of friends who were willing to actually come over to your house, come take time out of their day, maybe get in a car or ride their bikes over to your home and sit down and start playing for 3 to 4 hours, or more likely all night until your parents finally kicked people out. But nowadays, finding a D&D or a tabletop game is just finding some like-minded people and hopping in a Discord server. I think let's start with talking about just kind of how things have changed in regards to what playing tabletop is. When's the last time you actually did play a game in person?
I was almost in a game prior, well, lucky you.
I know.
Nice.
Mine goes all the way back to before the pandemic. I was going to be in a Mass Effect tabletop RPG game with a couple of my friends, and then the pandemic started, and that subject hasn't been broached. Well, I brought it up a few times, but then those friends just keep ignoring it and don't seem to want to play with me anymore. And I'd also like to point out, too, that even after it was canceled because of the pandemic, they still started another in-person game. So I think it might have just been me.
Well, we started an in-person game with the people who lived in our house.
It's still an in-person game. Okay, I just want to point that out in case anyone missed it. It was with Kali. Kali. I was supposed to play with Kali.
Is that you've managed to let it go and move on with your life, and you don't let it bother you to this day.
I really want to play Mass Effect as a tabletop RPG.
I do too, actually. That sounds like a lot of fun.
That would be fun.
Erin, where did you play in person 2 weeks ago?
I'll show you. I played to the people who are watching right there.
Oh, that's a nice setup too.
Thank you. I bought that table for $50 from a very nice lady who is moving.
All right.
So yeah. So I played with Steve, who you know, and the Ladies of Lore, who conveniently live 3 miles from my house, and they came over and we played a quick little cozy one-shot.
Oh. See, when it comes to having, friends or family that live with you or near you, it's actually really, really easy to get going in person. If you have a local game store near you as well, they sometimes host like D&D nights, some sort of free-for-all type things, and things like that. It kind of depends, I think, on what you're getting into, right? If you like the ideas of playing a bunch of different sort of, indie RPGs or, one-shots like Erin mentioned, then it probably is easier to just find a place like a local game store that can, that does them easily. But if you're looking for like a longer term table, someplace where, that you want to feel safe, that you can communicate your ideas, your fears, your frustrations, your hopes, your dreams, all of those types of things, it can be a lot more difficult. I think we've all heard or maybe even lived through like the horror stories of people who have had terrible first sessions and then thought, you know what? I don't like this game and never want to touch it again. And when I hear things like that, it breaks my heart because, like a lot of things in life, your first D&D game or any tabletop RPG game for that matter, with the wrong table can go terribly, terribly wrong. But that doesn't mean that you should abandon it because there's so many things that can go right, like romancing all of your friends. Yeah. Because I have so much love to give.
Like smooching with your friends. Yeah. No,
exactly.
For a long time, I worked at a local game store. That was my job for a bit. And one of my duties there was that I ran a D&D tabletop night where anyone could come in and sign up and sit down and play. And I can't tell you the number of times that, I'd have some regulars who would come in and play with me for, 5 or 6 weeks. And then they would suddenly not show up anymore. And I would sit there going, well, I'm a terrible DM and everyone hates me. But I would find out then, one of them would come in to like buy dice or something like, or a new book or something like that. I'd be like, hey, what happened? And they'd be like, we wanted to run our own game. So we just started meeting up at my place now that we knew each other well enough and we trusted each other. So now we run our own game. And I'm like, that's wonderful. So then I would get a new group of people who'd come in. And I had that happen all the time when I worked at the game store.
Yeah, when it comes to playing online, you have obviously a lot more people that you can choose from, with things like obviously Discord, Roll20, all the virtual tabletops that are out there. It's easier than ever now to get connected with tons and tons of people. And there are some people who think that, that there's a certain level of magic that's lost when you're not sitting at the same table. I mean, it's definitely, I think, a different energy. I don't think it's any less than that. Erin, could you talk to us a little bit about, because you've put together a wonderful conglomeration, hive mind group of people in the tabletop RPG Collective. Just tell us about the collective. What went into making you want to create this space for both players and creators?
Well, I think I sort of leaned into the fact that my whole thing is like building communities, and that could be as simple as just building a space in my home for like me and mine. And when I worked for Neopets and then Greenpeace as community managers, it was like, it feels really good to people please in a healthy way. So honestly,
I'm sorry. Can I just circle back on that? You went from Neopets to Greenpeace?
Yeah.
That's a jump.
Yeah, that was a crazy ride. That was fun.
Talk about different audiences.
Exactly. And it's not all it was a lot more money, which was nice, but it was different.
I'll bet.
Didn't necessarily like it, but it was fine. It was a good experience. But yeah, that is just what I like to do. And I think I was in this sort of entrepreneurial mindset where I was like, I posted on Threads. I was like, should we just it was right after the OGL thing. And I was like, could we just all get together and be the underdogs of the indie tabletop community? And someone said to make a Discord. I forget who it was. I'd love to give them credit. And I was like, okay. And then a couple of days later I did. And then it literally just took off.
How many members is this Discord up to now?
It's 760.
Oh my gosh.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
That's pretty,
it's a lot.
that's pretty fucking awesome.
Very active people as well. I've woken up to 1,000 comments in the main channel and been like, all right, well, I'm never going to read any of that. It's a lot of people, but it's also a very, very great resource. I've gotten a lot of great advice out of there. But and all of this is to say that, when it comes to, well, Robbie, where do I go to find a group? I really wish that there was a single great unified awesome place that I could send you to. But the fact of the matter is that if you're really looking for a forever table, right? If you're looking for one of the tables that spawned out of Kali's, game store days where there are a group of friends now, it might take some time. You might get lucky enough and just join them. But it could take, looking on the D & Beyond forums and looking for group. It could take, joining a professional GM's table at startplaying.games. Maybe, you could find them on Reddit or a random Discord that you find through Threads.
Here's what you do. I got you. No,
Go for it.
I got you. Here's what you do. Find any gay person any queer individual and ask them where they play tabletop games. Mm-hmm. And if they tell you they don't play tabletop games, you call them a liar to their face.
Yeah.
Because bullshit.
You take that card away.
and if you just follow them wherever they go, they're probably playing D&D or tabletop.
They'll walk into it. Yeah. They will walk into a table.
By some miracle they're not, if they're the one who doesn't, they know friends
they
who
know
do.
Someone who does.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, the queer community has rallied around tabletop like you would not believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Honestly, even Twitch and YouTube are great places now. Twitch, YouTube, TikTok creators all over the place now have exploded in each of those places, whether it's actual plays, whether it's people just making sort of homebrew content. They all have their own communities as well, and it's really just a matter of just getting out there and trying to find places. And it might take you a minute. Please don't get disheartened if you can't find a table very quickly. But as far as the question of, hey, how do I start playing insert tabletop RPG here? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You also don't have to do it by yourself.
Absolutely.
You could have a best friend or somebody close to you or a sibling or whatever, and just be like, hey, I've wanted to play a tabletop game, and they happen to say, holy shit, me too. Where do we even start? And you could tag team and find a place and not feel so lonely doing it.
Yeah, my first game that I ever played was me, my sibling, and 3 of my friends, and I decided I was going to get a player's handbook and a dungeon master's guide and run a game. And unfortunately, that was in D&D 4E, which was not an easy place to learn.
Well, speaking of learning, then, right? Because I think this is something that, especially when you're coming in, maybe you've just heard of D&D. You've only heard of tabletop RPGs, right?
You watch Stranger Things.
You know that it's a game, right? So I think the first logical leap that people jump to from wanting to go into that is they know board games, right? So the first thing is, well, I need to know the rules. I see a lot of people that are like, how do I learn to play before I start playing? And I have 2 answers for this. The first answer is, it's honestly better if you have a good table. There are some people out there who are probably going to be like, you need to learn before you sit down. Run the other way. Don't join their table. A good table is going to teach you as you play. And I feel like the best way is to learn as you go. But if you do want to have a good, at least, we'll say foundational grasp of how things work, and this is going to be a hot take because I've already seen people for the past week arguing about it on social media. Watch actual plays. Go and watch other people play the game.
That's
all right,
a super solid way.
It is.
Absolutely. People will tell you, no, don't do that because of expectations. They're just mad because people at their table don't know how to role play well. Guess what? Other people do. All right, and you can learn how to do it. We watch pro basketball and we don't say, oh, don't watch pro basketball. You'll never be that good at the game.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, no, when you're watching like a well-produced actual play, just understand that you're watching it at its highest echelon. Like, this is where many thousands of dollars have been put into set design and token design and the story and the writing and all that. Like, but it is a great way to like look at a group and see like, if everything was perfect, this is kind of what it might look like. And no, is your little pickup game at your house going to be the same as that? No, but you're going to hang out with your friends and you're going to order some pizza and you're going to drink some booze and you're going to have fun. And that's the point.
And when you have those moments, years from your first table, or maybe even just a few sessions in, if you have a really, really special group, you will eventually have those moments that feel just as powerful as what you watch on some of those professional plays. There have been moments at Erin's table when I'm playing Chase in Vampire the Masquerade, even just the first session in with 5 people I did not know except that they were random heads on the internet, that had some really, really powerful moments that I was like, this is it. This is what it feels like.
Yeah, you're an incredible player.
No, stop! Don't. You can't. Don't. No, I'm the one. True. I am the one who compliments. Okay,
no, it's true.
Do not take this out of the final cut. You're a really good player.
I could do that if I wanted to.
Yeah, but
just out of the video, I get to do the podcast editing.
So to that point, obviously, tabletop RPGs are infamous for having massive rule books. I'd like to know each of your thoughts on how much of the rule books, even maybe not as a player, right? Because obviously if your DM has stuff, you have access to it, and we're in the age of digital media, so like PDFs are floating around everywhere. What are your thoughts on how much of the rules you should at least have with you? What should you have when you sit down the first time to play or to DM?
A PHB. I mean, if you're talking D&D, you should have a PHB to
Player's
reference.
Handbook for the uninitiated.
You should have that. But I mean, at the same time, you talk about needing to know rules, and it's like, I'm going to make a confession right now. I DM 6 games a week, 5 of them professionally. I, to this day, have never read through the Player's Handbook.
I would also like to point out that she how many games do you play in?
3.
So you have more games in the week than there are days of the week. Has anyone suggested to you yet that you might have a problem?
My wife, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, about 20% of my players,
my therapist.
Yeah, I would say most. If I had to like put it out there, I would say more people I know than don't have suggested that perhaps I have a problem.
On the other side of the spectrum, I have actually read through a DMG and a player's handbook once. When I first wanted to DM, I was working a graveyard shift at Walgreens. And so during my break, I just gotten, the Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual. And so during my break, and when nobody was looking, and I wasn't underneath the camera that was watching the register, I busted them out and I read cover to cover the DMG and the Player's Handbook. And I still, to this day, I think is the reason that I seem to have had such a mastery over 4th edition. And like I could create an encounter just on paper, perfectly balanced for 4th edition, and it always felt so nice. And even now, how many years into 5th edition, I'm always like, fuck, is this gonna kill them? Are they just gonna trample through this encounter in one go? And I'm gonna be like, well, I hope you guys had fun, because I didn't.
Well, I mean, we're not gonna get into this, but that's because the math in 4E was much tighter and much better. But
all right, fair enough. Erin, there was a moment. I think I know how you feel on this whole rules topic, because there was a moment in I think our second or third session of Vampire where I was away from everyone else. It was just me. I had to do something, and you're like, well, what do you do? And so I'm like trying to pore over my character sheet to figure out like, oh, well, what do I have for this moment? And you said, fuck the rules. Tell me what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my hot take. This is a spicy take to some people. You do not need to know a single fucking rule going into as a GM or as a player. You don't need to. And I will expand on that.
Please do.
As a player, my very first tabletop game, and this is coming from I was in a very abusive marriage where my husband did not allow me, and I'm using that word very pointedly, to play D&D because he thought that men would hit on me. That is the type of person I was with. So when I divorced him...
First of all, it's tabletop. We're all hitting on each other no matter what. And in my experience, it's more likely the women to be hitting on you. So
Exactly.
See, I was going to say the same thing, Kelly. Beat me to it.
It was an eye-awakening experience for many ways. But I started dating this guy, and we went to a cidery in Philadelphia and met up with a bunch of his punk friends. And the DM gave me a character sheet to guest as an NPC. And I played an NPC for that round. I didn't have to roll anything. I think I rolled one thing, and he told me what to roll. I had no idea what I was doing, except that I could kind of improv and act just due to being a creative person. And afterwards, he gave me a little possum bumper sticker. And as like inspiration, it was his inspirations. And he invited me back to be a player. And I never read a handbook. I never did anything. I kept that sheet and just added a couple things I wanted to flavor up the character. And then I just learned from doing. I just watched my friends play. That was your
first tabletop experience?
That was my first tabletop experience.
I love that so much. That's what I like to hear. And really, that's what it comes down to, is if you know anybody, right, even if they're like, oh, sorry, our table's kind of full, even if you can just ask them, do you mind if I guess like an NPC like one time, just like get a taste for it, right?
Yeah.
And that DM sounds amazing, right?
It was great, because he was just like...
All you have to do.
Yeah, and I didn't even have to ask. He was like, here's a character sheet. You're going to guest as an NPC because you're here. Like, come play with us. And it was so cool. And it's just like a bunch of punks at a cidery in Philadelphia. And it was so fun. And then we played that for several months. But as a GM, my first GM experience was Cyberpunk Red. And it was a online game with a few of my friends. And I care more, and Robbie knows this, I care more about the setting and the world building and the people and like the players. The players tell the story. I don't really give a fuck about the rules. And to this day, I have a bunch of books, but I only have them for flavor. And I'm more of a doing learner than a visual learner. I can't read something and retain that information as well as I do from watching the table. And honestly, it's more inspiring that way. Watching like Robbie and the other players at the table, like play, and especially Robbie, I'll call you out on this.
No,
as somebody
stop.
who has never played Vampire, and I had never story told. I was only ever a player in Vampire. So watching another new person in a way play the game was more inspiring than me reading through the rules and getting hyped up to play. And it allowed me to be like, I don't think I would have, if I was so stringent on the rules, I don't think I would have said you can or cannot do something more as much as I do now. Like, I'm just like, fucking be Chase. Like, don't worry about what you're rolling.
It's also a great, I don't think that prior to this that I had a chance to use my own advice that I give to new people. When people are like, hey, well, what advice would you give to a new player? And first of all, if all things sort of being equal, like in like this assumes that you have like a good table, you have a great GM. Don't worry about the rules. Just play your character. Just say what you do what you do, act how you're going to act, and the DM will tell you when to roll something, what rules to use, especially if you're just learning. And, I have a friend, Bill, who I've known since forever, who's an amazing player as well, who's been playing just as long as me. And he always does that. He just ignores the rules and just goes in. And so playing chase with you that first time in Vampire, knowing nothing about the game, I got to finally sort of embody that advice myself, and I'm like, oh damn, this really is good advice. This is great.
There's something to be said too for if you're new to a setting or new to a game system, it can be worthwhile to have your character also reflect being new to the system. Robbie, you play Chase, who is a thin blood and has just recently become a vampire.
Yep.
So as you're learning the rules of the masquerade and of vampire, so too is Chase. When I joined your campaign, Robbie, in Exandria, I knew nothing. I didn't follow Critical Role or anything like that. I had never played a game in Exandria or read anything about it, so I knew nothing about Exandria. So I asked you if I could play a character that had come from another world that I was more familiar with, who basically isekai'd into Exandria, so that my lack of knowledge of the setting is just in character, and you can absolutely do that.
It's so funny too, because Sarah, your wife, sort of the same thing. She came from like a group of people who had been isolated for years, so she's learning about the world, and even my partner, who has seen some episodes of Critical Role, isn't super familiar with it, and even her character had grown up living sort of a sheltered life in nobility. So like the three people who didn't really know that much about it worked that into their backstories, and it works out so well. Gosh, I'm super smart when it comes to giving advice.
I think
you're humble is what's important.
It's just really important, I think, to understand that it's literally just grown up pretend. At the end of the day,
it is.
It's like, remember
pretend.
like when you're kids and you're like to your friend, you're like, pretend that like I'm gonna come home and I'm the mom and you're the dad and I'm gonna be really angry at you, but like you have to like say, and it's just like
that's just DMing.
DMing.
You're just DMing.
No, and it's worth noting. We talk about what do you need to start playing, and you can talk about books, or you can talk about Roll20, or you can talk about dice. You should have dice, because just rolling dice makes the serotonin go. You should always have dice. But you talk about having minis or maps or all of that stuff. All of that is just flavor. All of that is just there to make the experience better. All you actually need to play tabletop is an imagination. That is genuinely all you need.
Now, to the point, though, about things like books, obviously, books can be very, very expensive, especially if you want to get into D&D. But I will point out that since the OGL stuff that, happened, D&D has gone Creative Commons. So you can get the SRD, the standard reference document, all sorts of great free places to get there. Even on D&D Beyond, if you set up an account without buying anything, you get access to all the basic rules. And here's the real hack. Let me really tell you how you get access to all of the stuff on D&D Beyond. You find yourself a DM who is so deep in, they are never going to get out, and you tell them to turn on content sharing, and now everything that they've bought is yours. I've even had people stop into the stream before, talking about how they want to learn, they want to make a character, and I'll just tell them, here, I'll give them a link in a DM to one of our campaigns. I have a guy who still has like a level 1 Thrycreen in one of our campaigns.
I was wondering about that when I saw that.
Yeah, he just wanted to make a character. So I'm like, here, go for it. There, you have access to everything now. So there are definitely ways around it. You do not go out and spend $450 on books if you are just starting out.
No,
all right.
So again, I used to work in a game store, so obviously, it wasn't my job to sell people things. We were supposed to try and make a sale. But what I would tell people, because I would have people come in all the time, and they would want to be like, I want to get into D&D. Stranger Things had just started getting like super popular, so there was this big renaissance in Dungeons and Dragons. And the thing I had the most of is I had teachers at schools wanting to start D&D clubs at their schools. That was like a big thing, and it still is. Apparently, if you're a student out there listening to the show, one, please ask your parents' permission to keep listening to the show, because I don't know that it's going to be appropriate. But two, check your school and see if there's a D&D club, because there's a good chance there actually might be. But what I would always tell people is if you want to be, an A+, like your DM's going to be super happy with you when you get to the table, have a miniature that represents your character, just one little mini is all you need.
And you can go to your local game store, by the way, and look through like the 50-cent bin hero clicks.
The little hero clicks from back in the day. Those make perfect miniatures.
My first mini was a Gambit hero clicks.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And you get a little miniature, get a little set of dice. You can get them as cheap as $5-6. And if you want to be a superstar, have your own player's handbook. Those are the only 3 things I really recommend for a new player to the game. Those 3 things are all you need to start. Mm-hmm. And even the player's handbook, if your DM has one, you don't even need that. Just get your own set of dice, and that's really more for you. Like I said, the serotonin and a mini to represent yourself. And that your DM might not use a map. But if you have a mini, you have this kind of representation in your mind of what your character looks like. Trust me, you'll get to the point where you start commissioning artists for pictures of your characters. That is you
want to talk about a real
you want to talk about the real money of this game is when you start commissioning artists to draw your characters, and then you commission them to draw them with their love interests and their smooching. That's where you really go down the well.
It's probably better to not have friends so that you don't want to like support them financially.
Yeah.
Because like that's all I do is like anytime I have any money for myself, I'm like, but I want to spend it on my friend's stuff.
I'd like to commission my artist friend. We here at Cloaks and Capes, we have Liz and Mia who are incredible artists. And half the time when I have some disposable income, I'm like, Liz, Mia, when you draw me something? I want a picture of my character again.
Yep, absolutely. Time for an awkward transition because we've always been bad at this.
But it's harder to segue.
That.
I love that.
I think about kind of wraps it up. We hit just about everything we did or that we needed to. The last thing that I do want to add, because you both got to talk about your first experiences at the table. I haven't had a chance to talk about mine. Mine was great, but then when I look back on it, it was bad. But I don't feel like it was bad. It just hits all of like those negative tropes. I was in college. My roommate played. One day he's getting ready to go out. I'm like, hey, what do you got planned for tonight? He's like, I've been playing D&D with some guys from my class. So immediately I'm like, ask if I can play. I want to play. So he's like, yeah, sure. I'll ask them.
You were majoring in acting.
Yep. I did go to school for acting.
Okay.
And so he's like, yeah, I'll let him. I'll ask him. And he comes back that night. He's like, yeah, you can join us next week. So we show up. We make the character. We start playing. My character is a brother to my roommate's, who's as a monk. This was in 3.5 days. Mm-hmm. And we get into our first battle, and my roommate, as a monk, really fast, can go really far, charges headfirst into a group of the lizard men we're supposed to be fighting, and he's the only one near them on their round of combat, so he immediately goes down the first round of combat. Then the wizard comes to his turn and is going to use an AoE spell, and the DM's like, that's going to hit the monk too, that'll kill him. And the guy goes, oh yeah, no, you know what, my character wouldn't care. He literally, this is what my character would do, and killed the monk, who was my character's brother. So like, I'm standing here like, so you murdered my brother
in front of my face,
and I'm like, if we're doing what our characters are supposed to do, we get back to town. I sold everything in my inventory that I possibly could to get a pair of boots of elven kind that took my stealth or my sneak or whatever it was back then way up, and I murdered them all. I coup de grace them all in their sleep. It's not a rule we have now, the coup de grace.
Yeah, they've taken that out since 4E.
If you get someone to sleep and they're not aware of you, they just die. And I killed everybody, and the DM's like, okay, well, next week we'll make new characters. And nobody was mad about it either, which is
so wild.
Super wild.
Very college coded. I feel like angsty college students would do that in acting.
My first game I ever did was actually a Diablo 2 game, because when you got the Diablo 2 collector's edition, it came with a little like D&D 3.5 adventure and map and like guidebook and everything. So that was the first game I ever played in, and I played a character who was a master of disguise and only liked disguising himself as women. So maybe there were some signs that I needed to like pick up on, and I didn't fast enough. Yeah, I probably should have asked some more questions about myself then. But I'll never forget, in the first game I ran, my brother comes up to me and goes, I want to be an atheist paladin. And I'm like,
love that so much.
And he's like, and I also want to be a dragonborn, a child of Bahamut. And I'm like, you want to be an atheist paladin who was born of the god Bahamut. You know for a fact the gods exist. And he's like, yeah, but I want to be an atheist. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a chaotic neutral deity that thinks an atheist paladin is awesome. And she will fuel your spells. But every time she does, you have to explain it away as pseudoscience. And
that's
God
amazing.
bless him. He did. Every time he casts a spell, he's like, no, that's swamp gas reflecting off Venus. Don't worry about that. And I'm like, outstanding.
That's great. That's great.
I love that you yes-anded that. That's amazing.
I love it.
Speaking of first times, though, I had mentioned at the top of the show that, whether you're actually looking for a game, in which case you got a bunch of information on how to best do that now, or you've been playing forever, you have a first-time story. So if you are one of the many, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people listening to this first episode.
Clearly.
And you want to share your first time with us, you should find us on, I think Threads is really the only place that we know. Well, Threads and Instagram. Instagram. We are Cloaks and Capes on Threads and Instagram. You can also find us on Patreon. This whole thing started, Cloaks and Capes first began when I got fired from my job for like the third or fourth time, despite being told, you're doing great.
You're doing great.
And I wanted to be the master of my own destiny, so I'm like, I'm going to start making magic items one a day. And now we have a Patreon. Cloaks and Capes. You can find magic items, subclasses. We just released the Sky Knight.
Yep.
Most recently,
our new fighter subclass.
Different. Modeled
Love
on
that.
the Dragoon. We have over 650 magic items. We have over 200 tokens for virtual tabletops. We got a bunch of stuff over there. And you can also listen to this podcast in the raw, fully uncensored, uncut, and ahead of everyone else.
That's hot.
There's a
You
non-zero.
heard it from Erin. That's hot. You should go check it out.
There's a non-zero chance that I take my top off in the raw.
Ooh.
Don't do that.
No,
Don't do that.
I didn't do
Non-zero,
that.
I'm in.
I mean, it's non-zero.
You'll have to watch it to see.
What?
Is it on or off right now?
Erin, if people
Yes.
want to see more of you, where can they find you, and what sort of things are you getting up to nowadays?
If you want to see more of me, God bless you. But if that's your cup of tea, you could find me on Twitch at ErinMyLaundry, ErinMyLaundry, or Threads and Instagram, same thing, but start it with an underscore because somebody took it. Or you can find me on Ain't Got Crit on Twitch, where we do all of our Philly by Night stuff. So if you're into Vampire the Masquerade, or if you're not into Vampire the Masquerade, but you're into Robbie, he's on
And
there.
who's not?
That's an even
Yeah,
smaller
honestly.
sample number. Just a quick note to the Philly by Night stuff as well. Like, even if you're just a little curious about Vampire or about Philly by Night and Vampire the Masquerade,
We call it bite curious.
what
That's
Erin
good.
has done with the Philly by Night Chronicles is basically created like an MCU style tabletop universe. You have 4 or 5 different groups and tables going.
It's 3 main coteries, but there's so many different
Little offshoots and
sections
guest
of,
characters and
Mhm.
vignettes and stuff. It's incredible what you've done over there, and
you.
it
It's
definitely
exhausting.
deserves it definitely deserves more eyes on it. So again, that's twitch.tv/ain'tgotcrit. Kali, where can they find you?
You can find me on Threads at Escalia on Insta, ESKALIA.
Oh, I thought it was Escalia Unista, like that was a character that you had made.
Escalia Unista?
Yes, every time that I tag you, I have to say Unista. Yeah, I know it was on Insta. Wow, good job, Robbie. Great job. Awesome.
Escalia. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Now it is. Now I
Yeah.
definitely am going to
Yeah,
make a character
okay.
named Escalia Unista. That's absolutely gonna happen.
You can also find her on Twitch at Escalia as well.
Yep.
And as for myself, you can find me at Robbie_Landis on Twitch, and then at a 01 on Threads. And that's where we all are. We hope that you'll find us. We hope that you'll listen to us. We hope that you'll tell people about this podcast. And until next time, just as a throwback to something that most people who listen to this aren't going to understand, but I'm going to reference it
That's how
because
we
it's
get
important
famous.
to us. I'm Robbie Landis. Keep watching or listening if you're on the podcast. We have a video version of this too on YouTube.
The Cloaks and Capes Podcast is created by the support of its listeners and generous Patreon donors. Special thanks to our Mythmakers and Legends, Heartslot, Dolvik, Celtic Crow, Dark Flux, Gamer Gal, Strix River, Tater Thoughts, and Capelli. Views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts. Music and production provided by Aiden Hageland. If you want to support the Cloaks and Capes Podcast, check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/Cloaks and Capes, and check us out on Threads and Instagram at Cloaks and Capes TTRPG. Let's chew ass.
No!